this is another one that I'm gonna tell you, like, she really did a fantastic job with not being redundant in the market and doing something different. Day guys, so today's video we have a make up your mind. I know you guys love this series so much and I'm so happy with the response that you guys have given me on this series, and it's been a little while since I've done one, so I was like, let's throw a make up your mind in here because there was a brand new release that came out just recently and I think it's launching like in the next few days, and it really called my attention. So I said this one deserves a make up your mind because they're expensive, they're pretty, kind of want it, but I'm not sure. I needed to search my collection. So if you guys are new to this kind of video, what I do in this video is I'm not looking for dupes. I love to say that to you guys because sometimes people are like, that's not a dupe. I'm not looking for dupes. This video is just a way of thinking before purchasing an item. So what I do is I look through my collection and I see if I can find similar shades to the palette that is releasing to see if really it's something that I want to add to my collection, or maybe I have so many palettes already that have similar tones that I feel at the end I may not want to add this palette because it's just going to be too many. And I like to try to tell you guys this. This is something that I've been practicing. You guys know, if you guys saw my prior video, I added 18 eyeshadow palettes to my collection this year. I know a lot of you guys out there are not adding as many as me because I do this on YouTube. But this is kind of happening that a lot of people are feeling very pressured into purchasing the new released eyeshadow palettes. I hear it from you guys all the time that you guys want to buy this, you want to buy this. And a lot of times you guys are actually buying these palettes. So this is a way for us to just sit back, mentally tell ourselves if we really need to buy this or not. I always like to give you guys like a quick little rundown on what this video is about, because when new viewers come in and watch it, they automatically think that this has to be a dupes video because that's what you're so used to seeing on YouTube. And I'm trying something different. I'm trying more of a way of thinking type of video. So I do like to explain that because this isn't a dupes video and I'm not looking at formulas or comparing formulas of brands. I will tell you guys in certain instances, like the brand we're going to talk about today, there is a difference in formula. I know that this brand's formula is very strong. So when I swatch these things and I look at other palettes, I will also be considering in my mind if the palette that I'm swatching it up against has a formula that I love. So the palettes that we're gonna be trying to find in our collection today is going to be from Pat McGrath. It's her brand new Galactic Gold palette. This is the new Star Wars edition, and also the Dark Galaxy palette. So these are two smaller versions of the Pat McGrath palettes, but they still do retail for $65 and you're getting 6 shades. So this is a pretty pricey palette, but like, you know, Pat McGrath does have amazing formula. I have to say, I'm not a Pat McGrath collector. However, I don't collect makeup, so I'm not a nobody collector. Like no brand I will ever say I'm a collector of. However, Pat McGrath, I do only own one eyeshadow palette from her, and it's the Mothership V, and I really do like it a lot. So that being said, I do know her formula. I do like her formula. I do enjoy her formula. As I'm trying to find colors in my collection that are similar to her new release, I'm also going to be considering whether the palette that I'm swatching it up against has a formula that I love as well, or if the Pat McGrath one is just a tad bit better because her formula is just really, really good. So there's going to be a few little things that are going to go through my mind while we're looking through my collection. I'm really going to tell you guys that I am really eyeing the Dark Galaxy one. That is the one that I'm like, the Galactic Gold one's really pretty too, but I'm really eyeing the Dark Galaxy. That's the one that made me want to do this. When I was looking at the palette though in the photograph, I was like, those shades, even though they're pretty, do I kind of have some of them? And I thought of a few different palettes that I may be able to find them in. But I'm going to tell you guys, before I even start showing you guys what I found in my collection, I have to give this to Pat McGrath. I really think that she came out with very unique colors in this collection. I did not have an easy time finding similar shades. Even some of the shades I found, I still think that some of them, the Pat McGrath shade is prettier. Like I like it more than what I found in my collection. All right, so we're gonna start off with the palette that I am actually dying to buy because that's the one that I feel like I was able to find more similar shades to. However, like I said, I still don't think I did a great job. These are the shades that I was able to find in my collection that look very similar to the swatches that Trend Mood 1 posted on the Dark Galaxy palette. So these are them. I'm going to show you guys a screenshot of my swatches up against the swatches that Trend Mood 1 posted. So as you guys can see, there is some variance here. I was not able to find every single one of the shades, and some of the shades I was able to find, but I still think there's something about the Pat McGrath one that kind of like caused my attention. For the Dark Galaxy, I jumped into the Natasha Denona Gold palette. I also jumped into the new Huda Beauty Mini Nude palette. I jumped into this palette right here, which I'm gonna tell you guys, it's not really my favorite palette, which kind of excites me because it gives more ups to the Pat McGrath palette in my opinion. So this one right here from Morphe, and this is the 15N Night Master. And the last one is from Pat McGrath herself, and this is the Mothership 5. Those are the palettes that I'm able to find similar shades in, so let's jump into it right now. Let's start with the first one. So the first one is this beautiful gold shade that you see in the Pat McGrath palette. Now this is like their standout shade. I believe I was able to find a similar shade inside of the Natasha Denona Gold palette in this color right here called Oro. Now I do think, looking at these two colors, these colors may look very similar for sure. Now, I love Natasha Denona's formula. Natasha Denona has a beautiful formula. When swatching this one, this thing glided on like butter onto my hand. I do think that this is a beautiful shade. I honestly love it. And I feel like the one that I have in Natasha Denona is good enough for me because this is not a shade that I jump into very often. I actually used it a little bit on my lids today, and I kind of covered it a little bit more because I felt like it just popped more than I wanted. This shade right here, so this one here is the next in line. When I was trying to swatch it, I feel like this swatch does look very, very similar to the actual swatches that were posted by Trend Mood, but I'm not 100% sure if this one's going to be exact because I did find it in another Pat McGrath palette, and that's the Mothership 5. It's this one right here, which is this like reddish tone, and when swatched, it does look super similar to the swatch that I see here on Trend Mood. I know Pat McGrath has repeated shades in the past. I'm not sure if this one really is a repeated shade or if it's just one that just looks kind of similar. Now this is also a very pretty shade. I will tell you guys, even in the Pat McGrath Mothership 5, it's a shade I do grab, but I don't grab it that often. So it's another one of those shades that the first two shades, the most eye-catching shades in my opinion in this palette, are not really shades that I always gravitate to. So, you know, for $65, I have to consider that. So then when we moved on to the next one, this is probably the most unique shade. So I thought that I would find this. This is like a purpley type of metallic shade. I really thought I was gonna find this, and I feel like a lot of the palettes that I own, when they has like this type of lilac-y purple shade, they all are dual chrome or they're just very faint. And Pat McGrath's metallics are not faint. I mean, if you guys own Pat McGrath, you know that they're not faint. So this one I had a hard time finding. I did find a semi-similar color in the new Nude Mini from Huda Beauty in this shade right here. Now, Huda Beauty's formula is very good as well. I do think, however, that the new Nude palette, this one, I feel like this shade is a lot lighter. So I don't feel like I was able to find this exact shade. And I do kind of prefer the look of the shade that I see inside of the Pat McGrath palette. So that shade actually has me a little intrigued. I really like that one. I feel like it's super unique, and I'm really intrigued by that color. Now this is where it gets really interesting for me. The next two shades I was able to find in the same palette. And now these two shades are shades that I looked around my entire collection for because I like these colors. These are really pretty colors. I really like them. And I was like, okay, well, do I have this? And I had such a hard time, but I did actually end up finding them. However, in the palette that I found them in, I don't love this palette. So it's kind of like a selling factor for me for the Pat McGrath one. But so I did find the next shade right here in the Morphe 15N. It's this one called Cliche. Now this shade is in the Morphe palette. It's just I mean, it took so long for me to even build up this swatch. Now, it has a very similar tone to the Pat McGrath one, and a lot of my other purples that are matte like this one, they're not as light. They're more of a deep, dark purple. So I had a really hard time finding this exact type of purple matte shade in my collection. Now, like I said, this is the most similar one I was able to find, but I don't like Morphe's formula that much. Some palettes I like more than others, so that gives a pretty nice little knock up to the Pat McGrath palette for me. So then again, I found the next shade, Excuse Me, is very similar to the one in the Pat McGrath palette as well. Now, like I said, the Morphe formula is not my favorite. The metallics in this palette in the 15N are a little bit better, but at the same time, I couldn't find that shade in any other one of my palettes. So considering that the palette that I found it in was this one, and this is a palette that I wouldn't mind decluttering, I'm kind of more interested now back into the Pat McGrath one because I do like those two shades a lot, and both of them are shades I found but in a palette that I wouldn't mind getting rid of. So now I'm kind of like back on the bandwagon, you know what I mean? Then the last shade I jumped back into the Mini Nude, and it's this shade right here in the corner. Now I will tell you, I was able to find a very similar shade, and I bet you put up together they're gonna look very similar. I do feel like the Pat McGrath one has a little bit more pink in it that kind of intrigues me, like, because I really like the way the last 4 tones in the Pat McGrath palette look together. The gold and the little bit reddish color, even though they look nice, I'm kind of having a little bit of a, I don't know, like, I don't know about the red with the purple. So for this one in particular, the one that I'm really eyeing, I was able to find pretty similar tones, I have to admit. However, considering the fact that the Morphe one is one that I wouldn't mind getting rid of, and also that the new Nude one that I found 2 of the tones in, I feel like those 2 tones are more subtle in the new Nude than they probably would be in the Pat McGrath. I am really thinking that the Pat McGrath Dark Galaxy one may be one that I can add to my collection without feeling like I, you know, overdid it. I will also tell you, even though I like the new Nude Mini, I don't grab this one that often at all, and it's because some of these shades are very pale, very light. So for that palette alone, I'm actually kind of excited. I'm not gonna lie, and I do think that Pat McGrath did a very good job with color selection and originality in that palette. So now the next one is not the one that called my attention as much. It's called the Galactic Gold. But the reason I wanted to include it was because I do know everybody has a difference in preference of what they like and what they don't. So even though this isn't the one that calls my attention, it may be calling your attention. So I did want to include my findings on this one. For the Galactic Gold, the palettes that I jumped into were the Colored Raine Queen of Hearts. I also jumped into the BH Cosmetics It's My Raye collaboration. And finally, I also jumped into the Mini Nude Obsessions palette from Huda Beauty. The last one is I did find one tone that is not even that similar in the Natasha Denona Gold palette. So those are the 4 palettes that I jumped into for this other Galactic Gold palette. Now, I will tell you, when I first saw this one, the first thing I thought was this palette right here, the It's My Raye collaboration with BH Cosmetics, reminded me of this other palette so much, of the Galactic Gold. And I was able to find a few tones in here. I will tell you, if I had to pick, obviously, in my opinion, the Pat McGrath formula is a million times better than this formula. This is what I was able to come up with, and I'm gonna tell you guys, I thought that the other one was the more original one, but this one, this Galactic Gold palette, is even more unique than the other one. And it's because I literally went through all my new releases, all of my palettes, and I had such a hard time finding tones that were similar, like even in shade match, like it was just so hard. So this is another one that I'm gonna tell you, like, she really did a fantastic job with not being redundant in the market and doing something different. So this one here, I was able to find a similar tone to the gold, which is this one here at the end. And I found it in the It's My Raye palette, and it's this color right here called Golden Girl. Now, these palettes cannot compare. The BH Cosmetics one is not a bad palette, but the Pat McGrath formula, when you swatch metallics, it's literally like liquid gold. And this one was giving me a little bit more of, you know, it was a little harder of a work. Can you come up with similar looks? Will people be able to tell? Probably not on your lids. People probably won't be able to tell. But, you know, just with working with it, I mean, yes, this is not the same formula. So, yeah, I found a very similar tone, but the formula there's a huge up on the Pat McGrath side. So then if we jump into this purple right here is another tone that I found inside of the It's My Raye. It's this color called Charmed. Now, this is another one that even though I found that the tones are very similar, the It's My Raye, the BH Cosmetics palette just can't live up to the formula of the Pat McGrath one. You can just even tell, like, I know that the Pat McGrath, I know that these Pat McGrath swatches are photoshopped. If you guys can see, obviously they are photoshopped onto each one of the arms. But just from experience with the brand, I do know that her metallic formula is amazing and it glides on. Even though this one here has a similar tone, I feel like the Pat McGrath one here is going to be so much deeper and richer and a lot prettier. And I had a hard time, I'm going to tell you guys, that tone I couldn't find anywhere. I really couldn't find it. I looked a lot of palettes, and that was a very unique deep purple with a nice like metallic shift. That's a really pretty one. And then if we move on to the next one, this is another one that I had a hard time. Like I said, the only palette that I was able to find it in is this one as well. And it's the same tone that I used for the other one, which is this one. And I personally think that the Pat McGrath one has a little bit more of like a purple shift to it. And the Pat McGrath one is a lot stronger, a lot prettier, a lot more unique. So this one goes to the Pat McGrath one again. I feel like that was a very, very unique tone. If we move on, the next two I was able to find in a palette that I believe has very good formula. So this one is comparable. I mean, I just think that this formula is great and I really love it. So the next one that I was able to find was this one right here, which has a little bit more of like that orangey kind of gold. And it's this one called Your Majesty from the Queen of Hearts palette. I really like this palette and I like this formula a lot. So this color to me is pretty similar. The Pat McGrath one is probably going a little bit more orange, but it's not like a selling point for me just because I do love the Queen of Hearts palette a lot. And then the next one is another color that I did find in Queen of Hearts as well, and it's called Noblewoman. Now this one I think is probably the one that I was able to find that was the most spot on match. This one is kind of like, okay, this color for sure I have it, and yes, and I really do love the Queen of Hearts formula, so I'm okay with that color. But the last color, guys, this one was super hard to find. And it's the only reason that I even brought the Natasha Denona Gold palette back in was because I couldn't find the shade. And the only color I was able to find was this one up here called Lime Chrome. Really, because the Pat McGrath one just has this really cool, like, golden, but yet it's not really gold. It almost goes a little bit like green in the photos. Like, I don't know, like that's a cool shade. That's a cool shade. And the only one I was able to find that had even a similar type of tone to it was a Natasha Denona Gold one, but I don't even think that that is like a spot on match or not even close. Like, it's close enough that I could find, but that one is also really different. Now, I will say, this palette that I'm looking at right now from Pat McGrath is probably the most unique to my collection because literally all of these shades that I was able to find in other shades, except for maybe one in the Queen of Hearts, I feel like the Pat McGrath formula is going to knock them all out of the water. And some of these palettes, like even the It's My Raye, I wouldn't mind decluttering. I've already told you the nude palette, the mini nude is kind of very pale for me. It's just on a very pale side. So like, I do feel like that one is just extremely unique. Very unique to what has come out in the market just recently. Couldn't find it in hardly any palettes, to be honest. And yeah, it's also a beautiful, beautiful selection of colors. So one of the things though that I feel with both of these palettes is their majority of metallic-y kind of shades. Like there's a majority of metallic-y shades going on in both of these palettes. However, if you guys look at the one that the Galactic Gold is mostly all like, you know, shimmery, metallic-y type of shades. The Dark Galaxy actually has one matte in there. To myself to spend $65 on two different palettes basically, because literally both of these are so unique. But I mean, like if I had to pick one, like looking at these, I would just say that for me personally, the Dark Galaxy is just calling my attention more. Palettes that I found the colors in are palettes that I wouldn't mind decluttering, and also I love the Pat McGrath formula. And then the other one is the most unique to me. Like I don't have these colors just for the $65 and all the metallics and the shades that I see here. These shades that I see here after swatching them on my arm, I'm like, okay, they're beautiful, beautiful shades. It's just not shades I'll grab all the time. So I mean, am I okay with having the cheaper versions? I guess I am. But the other one, on the other hand, are shades that I would use and shades that I actually really like. So yeah, I think I've made up my mind. I think I'm going to buy the $65 Dark Galaxy palette from Pat McGrath because it's beautiful. I am not a Star Wars fan, so that doesn't matter to me. I think it's a really pretty palette. I'm excited that it's unique enough for me to add, and yeah. But if you guys are looking at either one of these, just knowing that I have a lot of eyeshadows in my collection, and really I will say both of these were very hard to find. Were very well thought out, very different to what's on the market right now. So I am excited, and I think Pat McGrath did an awesome job. So I can't wait to add one of these to my collection. Let me know down below if you guys are gonna add any of these, if you guys thought this video was helpful, and if you guys were able to find these colors in your collection and which palettes you found them in. I wanna know. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget, leave me your comments below and subscribe if you haven't already so you guys can see more of these kinds of videos, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.